Infinitive is a grammatical term used to refer to certain verb forms that exist in many languages. As with many linguistic concepts, there is not a single definition applicable to all languages. The word is derived from late Latin infinitivus, a derivative of infinitus meaning infinite. Infinitives are used mostly as non-finite verbs. In traditional descriptions of English, the infinitive is the basic dictionary form of a verb when used non-finitely, with or without the particle to. Thus to go is an infinitive, as is go in a sentence like I must go there. The form without to is called the bare infinitive, and the form with to is called the full infinitive or to-infinitive. In many other languages the infinitive is a single word, often with a characteristic inflective ending, such as manger eat in French, porter carry in Latin, lieben love in German, etc. However, some languages do not have any forms identifiable as infinitives. Many Native American languages and some languages in Africa and Australia do not have direct equivalents to infinitives or verbal nouns. In their place they use finite verb forms and ordinary clauses or various special constructions. As a verb, an infinitive may take objects and other complements and modifiers to form a verb phrase. Like other non-finite verb forms, infinitives do not generally have an expressed subject. Thus an infinitive verb phrase also constitutes a complete non-finite clause, called an infinitive clause. Such phrases or clauses may play a variety of roles within sentences, often as nouns, and sometimes as adverbs or other types of modifier. Infinitives are not usually inflected for tense, person, etc. as finite verbs are, although some degree of inflection sometimes occurs. For example, Latin has distinct active and passive infinitives. Infinitive phrases and clauses. An infinitive phrase is a verb phrase constructed with the verb in infinitive form. This consists of the verb together with its objects and other complements and modifiers. Some examples of infinitive phrases in English are given below. These may be based on either the full infinitive or the bare infinitive. To sleep, to write 10 letters, to go to the store for a pound of sugar. Since an infinitive does not normally take an expressed grammatical subject, an infinitive phrase effectively constitutes an entire clause. Viewed in this way, it is called an infinitive clause or infinitival clause, and is one of the types of non-finite clause. Such a clause can then play various grammatical roles as a constituent of a larger clause or sentence. For example, it may serve as a noun phrase or adverb. Clauses may be embedded within each other in complex ways, as in the sentence, I want to tell you that John is going to get married. Here the infinitival clause to get married is contained within the finite dependent clause that John is going to get married. This in turn is contained within another infinitival clause, which is contained in the finite independent clause. The grammatical structure of an infinitival clause may differ from that of a corresponding finite clause. For example, in German, the infinitive form of the verb usually goes to the end of its clause, whereas a finite verb typically comes in second position. Marking for tense, aspect and voice. In some languages, infinitives may be marked for grammatical categories such as voice, aspect, and to some extent tense. This may be done by inflection, as with the Latin perfect and passive infinitives, or by periphrasis, as with the Latin future infinitives or the English perfect and progressive infinitives. Latin has present, perfect and future infinitives, with active and passive forms of each. For details see Latin conjugation, infinitives. English has infinitive constructions which are marked for aspect, perfect, progressive, or a combination of the two. These can also be marked for passive voice, to, eat, to, be eaten, to, have eaten, to, have been eaten, to, be eating, to, be being eaten, to, have been eating, to, have been being eaten. Further constructions can be made with other auxiliary-like expressions, such as be going to eat or be about to eat, which have future meaning. For more examples of the above types of construction, see uses of English verb forms, perfect and progressive non-finite constructions. Perfect infinitives are also found in other European languages which have perfect forms with auxiliaries similarly to English. For example, avoir mangé copyright means, to, have eaten in French. English. Regarding English, the term infinitive is traditionally applied to the unmarked form of the verb when used as a non-finite verb, whether or not introduced by the particle to. Hence sit and to sit, as used in the following sentences, would each be described as an infinitive. I can sit here all day. I want to sit on the other chair. The form without to is called the bare infinitive. The form introduced by to is called the full infinitive or to infinitive. The other non-finite verb forms in English are the gerund or present participle, and the past participle a. These are not referred to as infinitives. Moreover, the unmarked form of the verb is not regarded as an infinitive when it is used as a finite verb, as a present indicative, subjunctive, or imperative. Certain auxiliary verbs are defective in that they do not have infinitives. This applies to the modal verbs, as well as certain related auxiliaries such as the had better and the used to be able to for can, and have to for must. It also applies to the auxiliary do, as used in questions, negatives and emphasis as described under do support. However, the auxiliary verbs have and be both commonly appear in the infinitive. I should have finished by now. It's thought to have been a burial site. Let him be released. I hope to be working tomorrow. A matter of controversy among prescriptive grammarians and style writers has been the appropriateness of separating the two words of the to infinitive. For details of this, see split infinitive. Modern linguistic theories typically do not consider the to infinitive to be a distinct constituent, instead regarding the particle to as operating on an entire verb phrase. So, to buy a car is passed as to buy a car, not as to buy a car. Huddleston and Pullum's Cambridge Grammar of the English Language does not use the notion of the infinitive, only that of the infinitival clause, noting that English uses the same form of the verb, the plain form, in infinitival clauses that it uses in imperative and present subjunctive clauses. Uses of the infinitive, the bare infinitive and the to infinitive have a variety of uses in English. The two forms are mostly in complementary distribution certain contexts call for one, and certain contexts for the other. They are not normally interchangeable, except in occasional instances such as after the verb help, where either can be used. The main uses of infinitives are as follows, as complements of other verbs. The bare infinitive is used as complement of the dummy auxiliary do, most modal auxiliary verbs, verbs of perception such as see, watch and hear, and the verbs of permission or causation make, bid, let, and have. The to infinitive is used after many intransitive verbs such as want, aim, like, fail, etc., and as a second complement after a direct object in the case of verbs such as want, convince, aim, etc. In various particular expressions, such as had better and would rather, in order to, as if to, am to as to are to. As a noun phrase, expressing its action or state in an abstract, general way, used as the subject of a clause or as a predicative expression, to err is human. To know me is to love me. The bare infinitive can be used in such sentences as, what you should do is make a list. A common construction with the to infinitive involves a dummy pronoun subject, with the infinitive phrase placed after the predicate, it was nice to meet you. Adverbially, to express purpose, intent or result the to infinitive can have the meaning of in order to, or so as to, as a modifier of a noun or adjective. This may relate to the meaning of the noun or adjective, or it may form a type of non-finite relative clause, as in the man to save us. The method to use. Nice to listen to. In elliptical questions, I don't know where to go. After why the bare infinitive is used, why reveal it? In many uses of a to infinitive, it can be given as subject using the preposition for him to fail now would be a great disappointment. In order for you to get there on time, you'll need to leave now. The infinitive is also the usual dictionary form or citation form of a verb. The form listed in dictionaries is the bare infinitive, although the to infinitive is often used in referring to verbs or in defining other verbs. The word amble means to walk slowly. How do we conjugate the verb to go? For further detail and examples of the uses of infinitives in English, see bare infinitive and to infinitive in the article on uses of English verb forms. Other Germanic languages, The original Proto-Germanic ending of the infinitive was an, with verbs derived from other words ending in jan or janen. In German it is n, with iln or n endings on a few words based on l or a roots. The use of zu with infinitives is similar to English to, but is less frequent than in English. German infinitives can function as nouns, often expressing abstractions of the action, in which case they are of neuter gender, das Essen means the eating, but also the food. In Dutch infinitives also end in n, sometimes used with te similar to English to, for example. Het is niet moeig te begrijpen. It is not hard to understand. The few verbs with stems ending in a have infinitives in n. Afrikaans has lost the distinction between the infinitive and present forms of verbs, with the exception of the verbs wees, which admits the present form is, and the verb ha, whose present form is het. In North Germanic languages the final n was lost from the infinitive as early as 540 AD, reducing the suffix to a. Later it has been further reduced to e in Danish and some Norwegian dialects. In the majority of Eastern Norwegian dialects and a few bordering Western Swedish dialects the reduction to e was only partial, leaving some infinitives in a and others in e. In northern parts of Norway the infinitive suffix is completely lost or only the a is kept. The infinitives of these languages are inflected for passive voice through the addition of s or st to the active form. This suffix appeared in Old Norse as a contraction of mik or sik and was originally expressing reflexive actions. Kalla calls a euro plus C. Kallas calls himself our euro. The suffixes mk and sk later merged to s, which evolved to st in the Western dialects. The loss or reduction of an active voice in Norwegian did not occur in the passive forms, except for some dialects that have is. The other North Germanic languages have the same vowel in both forms. Latin and Romance languages, the formation of the infinitive in the Romance languages reflects that in their ancestor, Latin, almost all verbs had an infinitive ending with re. For example, in Italian infinitives end in a, re, or ia, and in rc, rsi, irsi for the reflexive forms. In Spanish and Portuguese, infinitives end in a, or a, while similarly in French they typically end in re, oi, and a. In Romanian the so-called long infinitives end in a, ia, and they are converted into verbal nouns by articulation. The short infinitives used in verbal contexts have the endings a, e, and I. In Romanian, the infinitive is usually replaced by a clause containing the preposition sc plus the subjunctive mood. The only verb that is modal in common modern Romanian is the verb a putea, to be able to. But in popular speech, the infinitive after a putea is also increasingly replaced by the subjunctive. In all Romance languages, infinitives can also be used as nouns. Latin infinitives challenged several of the generalizations about infinitives. They did inflect for voice and for aspect, and allowed for an overt expression of the subject. See Latin conjugation, infinitives. Romance languages inherited from Latin the possibility of an overt expression of the subject. Moreover, the inflected infinitive found in Portuguese and Galician inflects for person and number. These are the only Indo-European languages that allow infinitives to take person and number endings. This helps to make infinitive clauses very common in these languages. For example, the English finite clause in order that to have would be translated to Portuguese as para as ilha to termos. The Portuguese personal infinitive has no proper tenses, only aspects, but tenses can be expressed using periphrastic structures. For instance, even though you sing have sung are going to sing could be translated to apisa de cantastas cantado ias canta. Other Romance languages allow uninflected infinitives to combine with overt nominative subjects. For example, Spanish el abría yo los ojos or sin yo sabelo. Hellenic languages, Ancient Greek. In Ancient Greek the infinitive has 4 tenses and 3 voices. Unique forms for the middle are found only in the future and aorist. In the present and perfect, middle and passive are the same. Thematic verbs form present active infinitives by adding to the stem the theme vowel I-micron and the infinitive ending I-micron I1/2, and contract to form an I-micron I to the first I1/2 ending. for example I euro I plus or minus I to the first I micron I to the first I 1/2. Athematic verbs add the sole suffix I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first instead, for example I to the first I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first. In the middle voice, the present middle infinitive ending is I florin I plus or minus I to the first, for example I florin I plus or minus I to the first, and thematic verbs add an additional I micron between the ending and the stem, for example I euro I plus or minus I to the first I micron I florin I plus or minus I to the first. Modern Greek, only the ancient Greek aorist infinitives active and passive survive in modern Greek, but their descendants have a totally different function. The ancient Greek I cubed I plus or minus I to the first to right became I cubed I micron I to the first I 1/2 in analogy to the present infinitive I cubed I micron I to the first I 1/2 and then I cubed I micron I to the first in modern Greek, and is used only in combination with the auxiliary verb I permil I have in the formation of the present perfect, I permil I cubed I micron I to the first. I have written, lit. I have write, inf. When combined with I micron I plus or minus I had, it yields the past perfect I micron I plus or minus I cubed I micron I to the first I had written. Similarly, the ancient Greek I cubed I plus or minus I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first to be written survives as I cubed I plus or minus I micron I. Thus, I micron I to the first I cubed I plus or minus I micron I means it has been written. In Pontic Greek, infinitives have a similar function. They only serve for the creation of the present perfect optative, I plus or minus I micron I plus or minus I cubed I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first I wish I have written. Infinitives are formed this way, active root of the future plus I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first. Passive, root of the aorist plus I registered trademark I 1/2. Examples, I micron I euro I plus or minus I 1/2 I micron I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first, I 1/4 I plus or minus I micron I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first, I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first, I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first, I plus or minus I florin I 1/2 I plus or minus I to the first, I plus or minus. I cubed I plus or minus I euro I 1/2. I to the first I 1/4 I micron I registered trademark I 1/2. In modern Greek, I want to write translates I permil I 1/2 I plus or minus I cubed I permil, opposed to ancient Greek a 1/4 I permil I cubed I micron I to the first I 1/2. In modern Greek, the infinitive has changed form and is used mainly in the formation of tenses and not with an article or alone. Instead of the ancient Greek infinitive I cubed I micron I to the first I 1/2, modern Greek uses the infinitive I cubed I micron I to the first, which does not inflect. The modern Greek infinitive has only two forms according to voice, I cubed I micron I to the first for the active voice and I cubed I plus or minus I micron I for the passive voice. Balto-Slavic languages, the infinitive in Russian usually ends in ta euro unregistered trademark preceded by a thematic vowel, or t, if not preceded by one. Some verbs have a stem ending in a consonant and change the t to a euro unregistered trademark, such as mogti euro unregistered trademark amoa euro unregistered trademark can. Some other Balto-Slavic languages have the infinitive typically ending in, for example, a in Polish, ta euro unregistered trademark in Slovak, t in Czech and Latvian, ty in Ukrainian, no in Belarusian. Lithuanian infinitives end in t, Slovenian end on t or ai, and Croatian on t or I. Serbian officially retains infinitives t or ai, but is more flexible than the other Slavs in breaking the infinitive through a clause. The infinitive nevertheless remains the dictionary form. Bulgarian and Macedonian have lost the infinitive altogether. For that reason, the present first-person singular conjugation is used as the dictionary form in Bulgarian, whereas Macedonian uses the third-person singular form of the verb in present tense. Biblical Hebrew has two infinitives, the infinitive absolute and the infinitive construct. The infinitive construct is used after prepositions and is inflected with pronominal endings to indicate its subject or object. Victor Bh Hassa Fawar, when the scribe wrote, a Herr Lector after his going. When the infinitive construct is preceded by a to, it has a similar meaning as the English to infinitive, and this is its most frequent use in modern Hebrew. The infinitive absolute is used for verb focus, as an unregistered trademark marth ya marth. This usage is commonplace in the Bible, but in modern Hebrew it is restricted to high-flown literary works. Note, however, that the to-infinitive of Hebrew is not the dictionary form. That is the third-person singular perfect form. Finnish. The Finnish grammatical tradition includes many non-finite forms that are generally labeled as infinitives, although many of these are functionally converbs. To form the so-called first infinitive, the strong form of the root is used, and these changes occur. The root is suffixed with tar/tar currency according to vowel harmony. Consonant elision takes place if applicable, for example UX plus tar with oster, assimilation of clusters violating sonority hierarchy if applicable, for example neural plus tar nola, sur plus tar surra, t weakens to d after diphthongs, for example jua plus tar uoda, t elides if intervocalic, for example kijoita plus tar kijoita. As such, it is inconvenient for dictionary use, because the imperative would be closer to the root word. Nevertheless, dictionaries use the first infinitive. There are also 4 other infinitives, plus a long form of the first. The long first infinitive is kse and must have a personal suffix appended to it. It is the general meaning of in order to do something, for example kijoitiksni in order for me to write something. The second infinitive is formed by replacing the final s/a currency of the first infinitive with e. It can take the inessive and instructive cases to create forms like kijoitisa while writing. The third infinitive is formed by adding ma to the first infinitive, which alone creates an agent form. Kijoita becomes kijoitama. The third infinitive is technically a noun, so case suffixes identical to those attached to ordinary Finnish nouns allow for other expressions using the third infinitive, for example kijoittamalla by writing. A personal suffix can then be added to this form to indicate the agent participle, such that kijoittamani kija equals the book which I wrote. The fourth infinitive adds min to the first, forming a noun which has the connotation of the process of doing something, for example kijoittamin, the process of writing. It, too, can be inflected like other Finnish nouns which end in nen. The fifth infinitive adds maisilla to the first, and like the long first infinitive, must take a possessive suffix. It has to do with being about to do something, and may also imply that the act was cut off or interrupted, for example kijoittamaisillazi you were about to write, but something interrupted you. This form is more commonly replaced by the third infinitive in adessive case, usually also with a possessive suffix. Note that all of these must change to reflect vowel harmony, so the fifth infinitive of hippocurrency tar currency jump is hippocurrency ma currency isla currency and he was about to jump, not hippocurrency maisilan. Siri, the Siri language of northwestern Mexico has infinitival forms which are used in 2 constructions. The infinitive is formed by adding a prefix to the stem, either ia if the complement clause is transitive, or ika if the complement clause is intransitive. The infinitive shows agreement in number with the controlling subject. Examples are, ikataxiam and so I want to go, where ikatax is the singular infinitive of the verb go, and ikal halaincord we want to go, where ikal is the plural infinitive. Examples of the transitive infinitive, aho to see either them, and acta to look at either them. Translation to languages without an infinitive. In languages without an infinitive, the infinitive is translated either as a that clause or as a verbal noun. For example, in literary Arabic the sentence I want to write a book is translated as either yuridu an aktuba kita ban or yuridu kita bata kita bin, and in Levantine colloquial Arabic bidi aktab kita bi. Even in languages that have infinitives, similar constructions are sometimes necessary where English would allow the infinitive. For example, in French the sentence I want you to come translates to je vais que vous venir. However, I want to come is simply je vais venir, using the infinitive, just as in English. In Russian, sentences such as "I want you to leave" do not use an infinitive. Rather, they use the conjunction nth th plus or minus n in order to show that with the past tense form of the verb, nth nn florin, nth th plus or minus nth squared nn florin nth. See also, auxiliary verb, finite verb, gerund, non-finite verb, split infinitive, verbal noun, notes, Pana Florend and Delegan, Gabriella. Aspect ale substantivus el florinry registered trademark en Roma sent now actiala florin. Formed a manifestera substantivus el florinry adjective Louis P. Tua, Kim Schult, Pragmatic Causation in the Rise of the Romance Prepositional Infinitive, a statistically based study with special reference to Spanish, Portuguese and Romanian. PhD dissertation, University of Cambridge. Scott N. Collingham, Modality and the Biblical Hebrew Infinitive Absolute, App and Lungen Far 1/4 Adai Kund Day Morgendan 71.